Are you ready to learn how to teach a small group lessons? I hope so. They're the most important part of this program. Remember that the small group lessons are designed for the Spanish-speaking preschoolers who are learning English. Because many of them will need explicit language intervention to be ready for kindergarten, where the instruction might only be in English, the small group lessons can give them the extra attention and practice they need. To learn the small group lessons, I suggest you watch all of the small group lesson modules. This one is just an overview, but there's a separate module for teaching vocabulary in activities 2, 3, 6, and 7, and others on teaching story retelling in activity 5. We've also made a module about how to differentiate for learners who need more or less support. If you're ready, let's review the materials that you need and the structure of the small group lessons. This is the lesson cover page. It will help you prepare the materials and get a quick overview of the words and concepts that will be taught in that lesson. Start by getting the correct illustrations and the icons. Remember to look for this blue materials icon because that means you will need to gather some materials from the classroom. You will need at least one picture from the picture book, so it might be helpful to find the one you need. Make sure you have the take-home activities ready to give to the children at the end of the lesson. The kids like their homework. And finally, make sure you've chosen a set of game materials to use during activity 5. In this section, the words that will be taught in the lesson are listed. The orange words are always verbs and adjectives, whereas the blue words are nouns. The nouns are easier to learn, so we don't focus on them as much. Every English lesson features a concept, but some concepts are not a concern in Spanish, and therefore we may not be emphasizing them in the Spanish lesson. Children like to hear the words they know, especially if they are hard words, and it is helpful to give them additional opportunities to hear and practice the orange target words. The last thing to note on the cover page is the behavior rules. Before starting every lesson, you should review them. Children need frequent reminders of the expectations, and teachers need the reminders too. As you remind the children of the rules, you remind yourself what behaviors you're going to be looking for during the lesson. If you need a refresher, watch the module on behavior rules. Every lesson begins with a story. In fact, the lessons all have the same or very similar structure, so it makes it easier for you and the children to know what's coming. After reading the story in activity 1, introduce the 2 orange words. When the words are introduced in activities 2 and 3, the pictures and content of the story are used to make the words relevant. They get more practice with the words later in the lesson. In activity 4, just before children begin to retell the story, children say the parts of the story, which are character, problem, feeling, action, and ending. While you read the story again, children should play a game called story gestures. They need to hear the story again before it is their turn to tell it. In activity 5, the children are either retelling the story as a team or taking turns retelling the story individually. This is the most important part of the lesson because this is where the children get individual turns practicing the story while using the orange words and the complex sentences. During this activity, the teacher's job is to provide just enough support, but not too much, so the children can begin to retell stories independently. After the retelling activity, additional exemplars of the vocabulary words are presented and the children can practice the definitions again. There's a lot more to learn about the small group lessons. I suggest that you watch the vocabulary and the retelling modules next.